morning. I speak to you today in the name of the great Creator, the living Word, and the sacred Spirit. I'm grateful to speak to you on this month, which celebrates the first people of Turtle Island, the sister lands to the south, and the sister islands of the Caribbean, or Caribe. I want to begin by giving honor to our great Creator God. I give honor to the first people of the land that we stand on, the Ohlone people. I give honor to my own ancestors, the Boricua Taínos from Puerto Rico, and to all my siblings throughout the lands that we now call the Americas. I give honor to our Mother Earth, Bibi Atabe, who sustains us with great love. I'm thankful to Father Justin for allowing me this opportunity to share some words with you today from my experience as an indigenous Boricua of the Taino nation of the Arawak people. The Taino may not be a people that many are familiar with. However, our story is. My ancestors were the first to encounter Columbus and his crew and suffered under the cruel hardship of European colonization of the Western world. My ancestors were humble people who lived in harmony with creation and with each other. They hunted and they worked the land, not to take care of their own family, but to take care of the whole Yucayiques, or the community, because they recognized the community as their own family. History has written us off as extinct, but my presence with you here today is proof that we are still here. A simple trip to the mountains of Puerto Rico will allow you to experience what remains of our culture in the humble way of the Jibaro people, a blend of indigenous Boricuas and farmers of European descent on the countryside, the way in which I was raised and take great pride in. Our language gave us words that we use today, such as huracan, or hurricane, barbacoa, or barbecue, canoa, canoe, hamaca, hammock, and so yes, we are still here. I share this brief story about my heritage with you, not only to introduce myself, but also to keep the story of my people alive. You see, storytelling is at the heart of almost every culture around the world as a way of preserving history, heritage, and community values, and passing along wisdom. In today's gospel reading, we hear that Jesus was telling a story about bridesmaids. Like many cultures around the world, the art of storytelling is deeply rooted in the sacred traditions among the indigenous people, including my own. People will sit around and tell stories about the great hunts and harvests. They told stories about droughts and of natural disasters. They told stories of myths and legends that taught lessons about the values of our community. But the most important story in almost all indigenous communities is the stories of our origins, our creation. These stories tell about our people and where they came from, and our purpose is here on earth. They provide us with a sense of identity and guidance on our life's journey. I love creation stories. On most days, you'll see me wearing an image of a creation story around my neck. It is a raven on a clamshell. It's an origin story of the first people of the coastal areas of British Columbia. And the story goes like this. Raven was walking along the shores of Spit Rose Beach, and he found a peculiar clamshell at his feet. From this clamshell, he saw little creatures protruding out. And he posted creatures to leave the shell and join him in this wonderful world. Some came out right away, and some took a little more time. This is how the first humans came into the world. This story tells about the origins of a people and their purpose. Compassion, empathy, generosity, inclusion, and community are some of what we see in the story of the purpose of the first people of this earth. While the origin story is not of my ancestors, I wear this image because it tells a story of values that I share. And it was given to me by an indigenous elder in Vancouver Island, which the story I find to be very universal. As a community of Christians, we also have our own creation and origin stories. These stories tell us about who we are and our purpose here on earth. Today, more than ever, in the history of Christianity, I believe it is important for us to revisit the origins according to our faith, as we experience a great decline in our community as a result of what Christianity has become. So in the traditions of my ancestors, I'm going to invite you to listen to the stories of our origin. And the story goes like this. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. The Word, he was with him in the beginning, with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shined in the darkness, and the darkness could not overtake it. Now, this is probably not what you were expecting. Most of us were brought up with this 7-day creation stories and Adam and Eve, which has proven to be a bit problematic in many ways in our world today. But the Bible actually has a few creation and origin stories. Genesis alone has 2. I choose this creation story as it resonates with me as a queer indigenous Puerto Rican Christian. It tells a universal and inclusive story of our origins and our purpose here in life. Now, I'm going to go ahead and read it again and give you a moment to sit with it. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was a light to all people. The light shined in darkness, and the darkness could not overtake it. So how does that sit with you? How does that make you feel? Does it change anything? One of the things that stood out to me is that all things came into being through him, and without him, not one thing came into being. All things, just as they are. The manifestation of a creator's divine and loving will. All that came into being and are created carrying the divine DNA of Christ, just as it is. No exceptions whatsoever. Father Richard Rohr once said that nature and creation is our first Bible. To that I add, everything created is a chapter in the divine story of love. Each and every one of us. Recorded stories in sacred texts have come into being in the last nanosecond of the existence of the world. Before that, human beings learned about God through creation, because the mysteries of God are hidden in plain sight. Creation has been telling the stories of our origin and our purpose since the Big Bang. It reflects the image of the invisible God. It carries the DNA that unites us all as incarnations of God's love. Every plant, every tree, every bird, waterfall tell of our identity. Now, a few weeks ago, I petitioned a prayer request here in church to address the conditions of our faith. I shared that I was conversing with an elder online pastor who said, boomers and Generation Xers need to sit down and let millennials and Gen Zs take over. My response to him was, even if we did sit down, many millennials and Gen Zs do not want to take over. They don't want nothing to do with Christianity because the religion that has been handed down to them has been corrupted, has been harmful and toxic, and has inflicted trauma on many of them. The truth is that we have taken this beautiful inheritance faith tradition and turned it into a country club for the very elite members. We have hung hope so far high up where only the members have access to it. Just turn on the news and you'll see what I mean. We have divided our inherited universal and inclusive faith into the good and the bad, the saints and the sinners, the sacred and the profane, man and woman, gay and straight, black and white, and so on, all while gatekeeping our universal God and excluding all who don't fit the criteria. Honestly, we really don't, to be honest, to a degree, it's really not our fault. For years, we have been stuck on an origin story that revolves around the unfortunate timing of a hungry woman that led to the separation of God and human, and through the years, we continue to perpetuate that narrative of separation. The pastor asked me, then what is the solution? To which I responded, to repent, and to go back to the beginning and rediscover our purpose. And we will find that in our creation story. Many indigenous people in many indigenous cultures believe in the ability to shapeshift, to observe the living creature and study it for a long time, to commune with it, to meditate on it, take it in until we become one with it, and we begin to see through its eyes. We taste through its mouth. We walk like it, we talk like it, we experience life as it. For the two then become one. Now imagine, what would happen if we did the same thing with our creation story? If we sat with our divine origins and beings, just as we were created to be, long enough to become one with it. I believe that then we'll begin to see the divine DNA in all living things. That we will begin, that what was begun as a thought in God's mind became incarnated in love just as we are. I believe that we would then see the divine purpose that we are not here to create religious institutions for the in-crowd, but to live into the fullness of our humanity just as we are. We will begin to understand the teachings of Jesus in a whole new way. We would be able to shift from the Adam and Eve story to the Word, from the 10 Commandments to the Beatitudes, from the Levitical laws to the Sermon on the Mount, from the crucifixion story being about atonement, to it being a show of humility of our God sharing in our suffering so that we know that in our darkest moments we are not alone. Not about a far-off, angry God demanding vengeance, but about the loving presence of a parent with their child. For as Christ cried out, my God, why have thou forsaken me?" As his own community turned their backs on him and turned their shouts of Hosanna into cries of crucify him. As Peter ran off in shame, God was still present. God was present in Mary Magdalene, who walked by his side unashamed. She stood at the cross as he hung in agony and took his last breath. She kept watch as he was laid into the tomb and returned to anoint his body. We could be the Mary Magdalenes in this world, keeping vigil over the suffering and the afflicted, as the dead Christ in the tomb waiting to be resurrected. As a Eucharistic minister, I had the privilege of being a chalice bearer and sharing the blood of Christ with the congregation. As a church, we approach the Eucharist, the body and the blood of Christ, with such reverence. With such piety, we bow our heads as we eat and we drink the body and blood of Christ and allow it to enter our bodies and become one with Christ. But it's more than just that. Communion is a reminder that the mysteries of God are hidden in plain view. They're hidden within us. We eat and we drink and we digest it in what Julian of Norwich describes as a divine act of love. And I gotta tell you, when I read that this morning, something weird popped into my head, which I won't mention, but it just gave a whole new meaning to a phrase. And so, what remains is our identity as beloved children of God. Imagine if we were able to approach each person with that much reverence, to hold each person, animal, plant, and tree as sacred and divine. It would be the true embodiment of Jesus' command to love our neighbors as ourselves. What a beautiful inheritance we will have to pass down to the next generation. Beloveds, we have become obsessed with religion and institutions with little attention to our origins and purposes. We have worshiped Jesus for years, but not followed his ways. We have made Jesus into religion and into a fixed solution and passed over the fact that he has taught us that we are the solutions through him. We have lost our ways and pushed people out of the way in the process. The newer generation does not want our religion. They don't want institutions. They don't want to be let down again. They're tired of the hypocrisy, of the exclusion, of the hate, of the violence done in the name of God. They want better. They want a living God. If we truly want to embrace the kingdom of heaven and make a difference in each other's lives, we must go back to the beginnings. Revisit our divine origins and discover our purpose of living into our humanity just as we are, in love and reverence for our God, ourselves, and for one another. Maybe the next generation will consider listening to us then. I want to close by sharing a poem by my beloved St. Francis of Assisi, titled The Sacrament. I love St. Francis because if anyone gets it, it's him. And if I didn't know any better, I would say St. Francis was indigenous. And the poem goes like this: The Sacraments. Once I spoke to my friend, an old squirrel, about the sacraments. He got excited and he ran into the hollow of a tree and he came back with holding some acorns, an owl feather, and a ribbon that he had found. And I just smiled and said, "Yes, dear, you understand. Everything imparts his grace."